You're originally from the United Kingdom, and you moved to the United States after graduating from Oxford University. And I find this very interesting. Before you joined the political sphere, you spent 4 years working at Facebook, where you worked on the misinformation team. So you're going to bring in fact-checking organizations. That's probably why our Facebook has gone from 1 million subscribers down to, I don't know what, they won't let, we have no more reach on Facebook at WorldNetDaily, but whatever, so we dropped that. So you wrote for the Daily Wire, all kinds of lovely things, but you are host a podcast called Off Limits. I think that's where I first saw you and said, this guy is terrific. I want to talk to him. But then the other day, I am following 500,000 posts on H-1B visas, and I am all in. As a matter of fact, you're my first interview because I'm going to do a whole series of interviews on visas, not just H-1B, because that's not the only problem. And you posted something on X that, I don't know, your reach, I think was like 3 million people saw it. I call that viral. And I'm going to just read that X post and then we'll chat. Sounds. You know, the real reason tech companies love foreign hires, they practically own them and can underpay them accordingly. It has nothing to do with culture, that's in reference to Vivek, and everything to do with cost. And then another post is, people shouldn't ignore how wildly anti-American this is, from Vivek Ramaswamy. American culture doesn't venerate mediocrity over excellence. American culture is excellence. No one is waiting in line to go to work in India or China. Everyone wants to work here. I think that very well states it. The one thing I will tell you, disclosure, that I feel so strongly about this that it's almost the only thing I've thought about for 6 days. And I'm going to research this until there's not one fact that I do not know any longer about it. I think it's an existential crisis to MAGA. I think it is, if this is done wrong in the Trump administration, I think his legacy is going to be seriously harmed. And I do not want that for President Trump. But I also believe that what we have to do is persuade. And I've seen a lot of really harsh language. And I think that if we're going to keep MAGA together and this freight train of reform to continue, we're going to have to make sure that we are not severing ties by insulting people to such a great degree. And so that's my open speech. So let's start chatting about this. Why don't you fill in any gaps that I gave about who you are and what you do, but then just tell me, just tell me, H-1B and any other kind of visa program, your experience and your analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once again, thank you so much for having me. So I'm originally from the United Kingdom, very subtle, I know. So I actually came here to work in tech originally. So after graduating in 2012 with a bachelor's and master's degree in computer science from Oxford, I always wanted to come to America. It was just something like deep within me. I knew I wanted to come here. Silicon Valley is obviously the center of the world in terms of software engineering, coding, anything to do with computers. So I knew that's something I wanted to do. And I worked at a small educational startup company there for 4 years. And then I worked at Facebook for another 4 years. And during that time, I was partly on an H-1B visa, and then I was on a green card. So I kind of have experience of both different, I'd say, routes to being able to work here legally. But I also met a lot of other people, obviously a lot of people from India, a lot of people from China, just a lot of people really from the Far East is where the vast majority of tech workers come from if they're coming from outside of the United States. And so I've heard an awful lot of stories, an awful lot of experiences. Mine was, I'd say, the standard towards the better side of things. Of like, I came on an H-1B. I was definitely underpaid compared to American workers by about 15, 20%. The bonus there, though, is that I'm also making much more than I would have made in the UK, even with that pay cut. And so it's kind of, there are pluses and negatives there. But the longer I stayed, the more I saw problems with the H-1B visa system. The first is it's not the top of the top. It's not the cream of the crop. Quite often you're actually getting substandard workers, both in tech and also generally. I know I saw a lot of pictures going viral of, like people working in a bar, and that's an H-1B position. People working in the 7-Eleven, that's an H-1B. So when people say this is a specialist position, it's like, well, in some cases it is, but in many cases it's not. So that's one area of the issue with H-1B. But another, I think, is just the fact you don't have the flexibility as a worker. Once you come under an H-1B, you're kind of locked into the company that got you that visa. Now, on the one hand, that makes sense, right? Because they're the one who usually put all the money forward to get you that visa. They're the one who brought you to the country. But that also leaves a lot of people, depending on the company, and some companies are much better than others, to really being, to some extent, abused, at least financially, if you have control over that employee. They can't just move company. If they do move company, they have to restart either the H-1B process or the green card process all over again. And so you're kind of having that carrot on a stick situation where you have this visa, you're kind of holding it over someone's head. And when someone wants to come to America desperately, I think you have a lot of control over them. And I think, again, when people talk about free market system, I don't think that's necessarily the area. I think there's criticism of H-1B. I think it's more just it's somewhat immoral. But then the whole other route we have is this good for America? And I think that's the route I usually take, because when we're talking about individuals, any system we have of immigration, of hiring people for jobs, any industry, they're going to be good people and bad people. They're going to be trade-offs the companies are making. Like sometimes the company is going to want the best of the best and they'll get that from America. Sometimes they're willing to trade 5% in ability for a 10% saving in costs, right? So we're always going to be able to find these examples. But what it comes down to me, is this good for America? I think that's when we need to actually be thinking about immigration in a broader sense. So if we talk about the debate over immigration that this sparked, no one's talking about, like, is this good for the country? And is this good for what America means? Because there are a lot of people who come to America, like me, who want to come to America because it's the best country in the world. Yes, it gives them a lot of opportunities, but they want to contribute towards America, find their own American dream, and also make that American dream possible for others. That's really what, in part, motivated my transition into political commentary, is because I felt like I could make a bigger difference in terms of protecting American values. But then there are a lot of people who are pro-China, pro-CCP, don't care about American values, don't want to learn English. They just want to come to America for their own gain. And I think that has a lot of cultural impacts, political impacts, and societal impacts that we should be able to talk about honestly. And so when I saw this H-1B gate, as you called it, blow up, and a lot of people having a debate, quite a lot of the retorts I saw were, oh, I thought you only cared about illegal immigration. So no, I care about all immigration. Obviously, illegal immigration is part of that big bubble, and we should care about illegal immigration, and all forms of illegal immigration, I think, should be outlawed and strictly controlled. But that doesn't mean that all forms of legal are good. For example, when Donald Trump kind of hinted at giving a green card to anyone who'd done a 2-year, 4-year PhD.
That was not really a hint, Ian. Stapling a big card to every diploma is not very subtle.
But like, that's legal, right? That's under the guise of legal immigration. And I think that's a terrible idea. And so I think it's great that we've been having a debate over immigration, because this is one of the 3 pillars that I think are going to define Donald Trump's presidency. One is the economy, one is foreign policy, but another is immigration. Yes, we can talk about the border, and we should talk about the border, and we should talk about the millions, if not tens of millions of people who are here illegally, many of them committing violent crimes. But we should also have a general conversation about immigration, how we let people in, who we let in, and the kind of values we want to protect. And I think that's where H-1B is failing for me.
Yeah, there's so much in there to unpack, to say cliche. It is said to be so many, but I agree with everything that you said. And one of the things that I think bothers me the most is that this idea of, I thought you only cared about illegal immigration. Are you crazy? There are so many different subjects that you could look at and say, well, I thought you only cared about this subject when if illegal things are being done. But I care about American education, for instance, K through 12, higher education. And I don't just care about the illegal things that are being done there. I'm also caring about the fact that the indoctrination and well, we're not going to go into that, but I care about the illegal and the entire subject. The illegality of it, of certain things, is only a subset of the subject overall. And immigration, after all, is determining your culture. We have this is not the American dream. I'm not living in an American idea. I'm a human being. I'm an American, and I live in a culture that is an American culture. And it is not about skin color. It is about what Americans value. It's about what we believe in. And it's about our DNA, like how we approach things as very individualistic society in the sense that we know that it's up to us to make our future and we're going to work hard, take responsibility and all this. And I find that when Americans, migrants who come in, immigrants who come in, who want that dream, what they're doing is saying, I want to be an American. But if they're saying, I want to, one, come just for money, I need Constitution, Declaration of Independence, yada, 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 right? Or I want to keep my language. And this is another thing I think that is absolutely very disturbing to me. And that is that there are immigrant communities that seem to have as their leadership, if you will, if you can call them the leaders of those immigrant communities, whose goal is to bring their country over. Now, we have this great big gorgeous country called India. They have a history and a culture. I don't want America to be the second India. I don't want to be the second Venezuela. I don't want to be the second France. So it's not about language. Not language, skin color, or anything. It's about, I want everybody to actually foster and protect the American culture, and bringing in millions this way. Can that be done?
I think it's hard because I think the horse has already bolted on this to some extent. It's kind of the double-edged sword of America, because if you look at the immigration problems that Western Europe is facing, for example, they're seeing some pretty severe impacts of that, both in terms of housing, in terms of education, in terms of religion, like the spread of radical Islam in Western Europe. But America is such a big country and such a big population that I think we can actually survive much more before those impacts start to hit. I think the difference here is that the scale of the border crisis was so great, but also the problem was being moved to blue states. It was being moved to cities. People in New York City, for example, were waking up and actually seeing the impact of immigration policy. They didn't care when it was small border towns in Texas that were being destroyed. It's only when it actually lands on people's doorsteps. So in terms of whether this can be changed, I think a lot of it comes down to the fundamentals of why do people want to come and how do we actually have this conversation in a nuanced way? I mean, as an immigrant, I'm obviously not anti-immigration, and I'm often accused of being so. It's like, no, I came to America because I wanted to be an American. I didn't come to America to squeeze what I could from America and then maintain every single one of the values from Europe. And I think that's the problem that we're seeing now is people. One of the most wonderful things about America, I think, is it is truly a mixing pot, is that you can bring elements of your culture, elements of your heritage, elements of your religion, all of these things. But fundamentally, you are an American first. And that's the problem, is that you're not an American first anymore for many people. You are in America, and that's about it. And so, like, for example, you see people like Ilhan Omar talking about her being a Somali. It's like, no, America gave you every single thing in your life of any value. Like, America saved your life. And I think that's the problem, is you don't see people who are, say, celebrating their culture and also celebrating the fact they're American and carrying on their culture as part of an American umbrella. We're seeing segmented communities within America that are almost erasing and diluting the American. And that comes in many forms. It comes in education. It comes in culture. It comes with the eradication of fundamental American freedoms that are truly unique in the world. And we see it in all different kinds of ways. People coming from Europe and complaining about the American healthcare system. We see it, people coming from the Middle East and complaining about women's rights or complaining about education. It's always a strange thing. I've never liked the attitude of, if there's an American citizen complaining about America and someone says, if you don't like it, get out. I've never liked that retort. But I think that retort is 100% valid when you are not from America. And if you're not an American citizen, especially, you can't come here and then complain about it. It's like, if you want to be more like France, please go to France, be my guest. France sucks. America is amazing. And I think you need to be open about America being amazing. But then, if I can say one more thing on this, I also think a lot of this is about responsibility and our society's complete lack of taking responsibility. Because I think what's so great about America is it gives you all of these opportunities, but you're not handed opportunities. What you're really handed is the ability to go as far as you possibly can, to work as hard as you can, and to take advantage of the system of freedoms and the systems of individuality to do the best that you can for you and your family. That's really the true opportunity. You're not handed anything. And I think in the past, people would come to America knowing that. They would come with no money whatsoever and build these incredible lives and these incredible legacies. And now we have people coming here because they've been promised things. How many migrants have been interviewed at the border saying like, oh, we came because Biden promised us a passport, promised us education, promised us housing. That is not what America is about. And that's the problem whenever we talk about the past. It's like, oh, well, your family came from Ellis Island. Your family came in this century or that decade. That's it, but they came with no expectations of being given anything. And I think now people are coming with nothing but expectations. I think it's turning what America is on its head in that way because there is no responsibility. You are coming with nothing but entitlement and expectation. And quite frankly, that's not what America is. And if it gets turned into that, then America is going to be nothing or no different than Western Europe. And Western Europe is a mess right now. I don't want to live in Western Europe. I want to live in America.
No, you can bring your British cuisine here, but don't bring your...
It's a terrible example. People always don't like it.
Exactly. No, that's why I said it. But do not bring your multiculturalism cult from Great Britain, which has been what has devastated the UK, among other things. But I think the cult of multiculturalism is what I would say is the top problem there, where everyone is afraid to speak their mind because they're going to be called a racist. And the other day on X, I said, don't be afraid of being called a racist. If you're not being called a racist, which is invalid, but if you're not, then you're obviously not being bold enough speaking, because if you say anything in the UK, you are called a racist and Islamophobe. So anyway, the issue of free market, we are a free market society. The H-1B, the H-1B1, the OPT, I mean, I'm going to be digging deep on each one of them because actually, as I went through each program and dug, it was worse. The next one was worse than the previous one. I don't even know if H-1B comes in the top 3. And so we can't just talk about H-1B. We have to talk about visas, because then we can, if we just talk about H-1B, somebody will come out with a reform bill, say we've reformed H-1B, probably not, but we've reformed it. And then we didn't tell you that under this other program of H-1B1, I think it is 16 million people are coming in. 16 million. And there's virtually no oversight as to where these people are and what they're doing. And so it's not even connected to a company. But is this a free market? I mean, how can this be considered a free market, this program at all? Because if you're bringing people in and you're saying it's the best and the brightest, but you're paying them far less, and you are not taking people that are equally or more qualified just so that you can suppress wages in the industry, how is that the free market?
Yeah, I don't really believe it is. I think theoretically it can be, right? I think you can have a system like this where you truly bring in the best of the best and people who also want to push American values and want to enable American values. But I think we've gone so far beyond that. And we've also allowed a lot of these industries to regulate themselves. We've allowed big tech to set what they call prevailing wages. So they can say, no, we're not underpaying. This is the so-called prevailing wage for this role, which happens to be 20 to 30% less than a lot of Americans are getting. Yes. And then there's nothing, there's no complaint to be made. But I also think whenever we talk about these things, that's why I try and talk about it as broadly as possible, because you're right, it is about visas, it's about immigration. It's not about nitpicking a single visa that can be fixed and then we can just move on. We need to be talking about what the purpose of immigration is. And I think if we're going to be bringing people in, I think it's great to bring people in, but I also think we have to be bringing people in who are actually going to add to society beyond just the job they're doing. And I think there's also a question of why do we need to bring people in so badly? If that is truly the case, of big tech cannot survive without bringing in tens of thousands of people from India and China and a couple of other countries a year, then isn't that a problem? When we have some of the best universities in the world in the area of STEM, isn't that a problem that we are not training enough people in a country of 330 million to actually be adept in these subjects? And of course, there are a lot of people who are not getting these jobs because there are companies who much rather pay less and get twice as many employees. But then also, should we not be talking about education? Should we not be talking about the fact that people are doing ridiculous women's studies courses instead of computer science, or gender theory, or fat studies instead of engineering or math? There's so many questions here that go beyond just an H-1B. And I think to some extent, that's also the issue with Vivek Ramaswamy's tweet. It's not just about H-1B. It's the idea that America is in any way mediocre. I think that's why I try to really hammer home the idea that I think that was a horrendously anti-American tweet, because it was. America is not mediocre. There are obviously problems with American policy because every single group of human organizations has problems in its policy. But to say that America is mediocre, that's why we need to import people from India and China to fix it, I think is absolutely absurd. Because if that was true, as I said, people would be flooding into India, flooding into China. There would be startups in these countries. Why aren't there? It's completely backwards. I think a lot of that is in some way, quite left-wing anti-Americanism that gets a lot of attention on social media, gets people riled up. But I don't think it's cool to be really hateful of American. You can criticize a policy, but to say that American culture is mediocre, I would like to see Vivek Ramaswamy make as much money as he made here anywhere else in the world.
Good point. The reason why people are believing this is, that when you repeat something that could be 5% true or 100% wrong, often enough, it just becomes a reality. So one of the things that we're seeing is best and brightest, 1% or not 1%, 1/10 of 1% is being, the finest candidates from around the world. None of these things are true. So the best and the brightest, the cream of the crop, the best of the best is not true. That is not what is happening in these programs at all. The gates are swung open. There's a lot of mediocrity, if not most of it is mediocrity. And look, if all we have to be is mediocre in America, then we can fill those booths really, really easily. But let's go back. And by the way, but we don't have mediocre people. We have a terribly subversive education system in our government school system. I'm a huge supporter of vouchers, freedom, homeschooling, all of that, hands down. And I don't even know if we can reform our government school system today. If we could, great, wonderful. But we've been trying to reform it for 50 years and it hasn't worked. Let's go back to a couple of points that you made. Education. Are we really on the lower end with STEM? So for everybody who's watching, STEM would be science, technology, engineering, and maths, right? Now, in our universities, the top 10 universities dealing with STEM in the world right now include 3 or 4 that are American. And then there's one Chinese. I didn't memorize the list. I should have. Anyway, out of the top 10, 4 are American. Let's just say that. There is not one Indian university on that list. India shows up first if you take one ranking at 150th worldwide, the top STEM university. And another one said 175 and another 180. So from 150 to 180 is their top university dealing with the STEM programs. And America's number 1, MIT, Stanford, can't remember the other. And so the top 3 are American. How is it possible then that we could have a problem with STEM in our country?
Yeah, I think a lot of this also comes down to numbers. I think the fact that there are, almost 1.5 billion people in India and 1.5 billion people in China. We've got, 330 million or so Americans. It's just a numbers game, because then people always forget about that. Whenever we talk about math, people love to get rid of the proportionality element of it here. And so not only do you have more people, if we're thinking about people's talent on a bell curve, if it's about the same level of talent on a bell curve, just by nature of the fact that there are so many more people in India and China, there are going to be more people who are past a threshold of talent that it makes them worth hiring. So that's one side of things. We've also got the fact that a lot of them study here. Like the colleges themselves are not good, but we have a lot of people who come from India and China to study in the United States. There are many reasons for this. One is, I think, culturally, a lot of these communities push these subjects over others, which is not a problem in itself. But also there's a lot of money to be made from foreign students. A lot of these universities charge foreign students a lot more. In Oxford, it was a thing that we would do there. I know a lot of the summer courses, they were basically made their money for the year by allowing Americans to come in from American colleges, pay an absolute ton of money, and then walk away with a certificate from Oxford. It's like all these colleges do this to make money as they bring in foreign students. And so I think when we talk about, is there the talent? There's obviously the talent here, but it's a numbers game because of the population sizes. But also, just because the colleges are here doesn't mean that the students necessarily pursuing those are all American citizens. A lot of people get into the H-1B system from a college in America. But also, the reason a lot of the Western universities are better is just because we've been focused on this for much longer. It's much more of an established system. And a lot of the more foreign universities are newer. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I don't think they're particularly relevant in terms of the conversation about, are we getting the best people? Because when it comes down to that, we're not, because it was a lottery. People always ignore that part too with the H-1B specifically. We're not saying, okay, we want the best of the best. I don't care what they look like. I don't care what language they speak. I don't care what country they're from. It's completely random. So you're not even getting the best of the best. Because if we're getting the best of the best, it would be the top 1% in these universities. No questions asked, move forward. But we're not. Like, I went to Oxford University, computer science, and Oxford is the best university in the world for undergraduate study. And I went into a lottery system. Not meaning to sound arrogant, but if it was going to be the best of the best, surely you want people coming from Oxford University and Cambridge University and not some random university you've never heard of in China. The fact that it's a lottery system debunks the best of the best top 0.1% argument.
Exactly. The whole lottery system, which I think I want to do a whole program with somebody about each step in this system, because at every step you just, wait a minute, it's ridiculous, right? There's no oversight. They say best and brightest, and these would be highly specialized, unique in a way, because unique is a word that, there should be nothing else like it, but unique areas of study where there are such a dearth of the numbers of people that you need to fill. Like, say you have 50, one guy at 50 top tech companies in America, and there's only 75 people in the world because this is so unique, right? Now, that I'm all for. If you could whittle down, strip, actually trash H-1B and every other visa program and create a program that is just that. It's only merit-based. There is no lottery. We don't let India and China have them all. There's national security issues that I'm going to talk about on another program. But the whole thing is a charade. It's a fantasy. And it's very random. And then when I do see cooks, line cooks are being brought in on H-1B. So I got to tell you, I probably know thousands of people that could be a line cook, right? And do we really need to bring them from India or communist China? Don't think so. Does it seem to you that the whole thing is kind of backwards too because of this? The people that we know are going to be highly gifted in specialized areas are people that have already been in the workforce and got some traction on success, and they're going to be paid not $100,000 a year, not $150,000. They're going to be paid $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, because guess what? They're the creme de la creme. They're the best of the best, the best of the brightest. How is it that bringing in people that have no experience in the field and they're in school or graduated, how are they going to know that they're the best of the brightest? Of course, the lottery system is a problem, but what would you think it looks like to bring the best and brightest? Are they just recent graduates from just any university? Tell me what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is it doesn't. It's impossible for someone who is straight out of university to know how they're going to perform. That's why I'm more in favor of, for example, offering, foreign-based internships, allowing some kind of way to actually measure someone's ability. Because the